Wedding turned into chaos when parental favoritism and a long-hidden secret ruined everything. So this all went down last month at my cousin Nora's wedding. She's 38, the oldest of 3 siblings, and honestly, she's always been treated like the responsible one. Her parents, my Aunt Linda and Uncle George, never hid the fact that she had to basically raise her younger siblings, Emma 34 and Chris 29, because they were too busy working. Nora was the golden child, but not in the way you'd think. She got responsibility, not affection. The other 2 got the love, attention, and financial support. We all kind of knew there was favoritism going on, but no one ever called it out. Nora just kept her head down, worked 2 jobs to pay for college, and later became the type of person who handled everything herself. When she finally announced her wedding, the whole family was shocked she was even letting anyone else be involved. The ceremony was at this rustic vineyard outside town. Beautiful place, white roses, long wooden tables, fairy lights everywhere. It honestly looked like a Pinterest board came to life. I was sitting with my parents when I noticed something off. Aunt Linda was running around like she was the bride, fussing over the flowers, the photographer, even the seating chart. Meanwhile, Nora was in the bridal suite trying to keep calm. I went to check on her before the ceremony. She was sitting in front of the mirror in her lace gown, holding a glass of champagne but not drinking it. She looked tense. "Are you okay?" I asked. She gave me the slight smile. "Fine, just want today to be about me for once, you know?" That hit me because, yeah, she never really had anything just for her. The ceremony started fine. The groom, Daniel, looked like he was about to faint when he saw her walking down the aisle. Everyone clapped to cry, the whole deal. It was perfect until the reception. During the speeches, Emma got up. At first, it was normal. She made a few jokes about Nora being bossy, how she always acted like a second mom. But then she said, "Well, we all know why you were mom's favourite." The room went dead silent. Nora froze, glass halfway to her lips. Aunt Linda tried to wave Emma off, but Emma smirked and said, "Oh, should I not mention Dad's little secret? How you're not actually his kid." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Chair squeaked. Someone dropped a fork. Nora's face went white. "What the hell are you talking about?" Daniel asked, standing up. Emma shrugged, drunk and bitter. "Ask your new wife. She's known for years. Mom told her when she was 15. But don't worry, George still paid for all her college, even though she's the product of Mom's little." Asked. Literal gasps. Uncle George looked like he was going to explode. Aunt Linda buried her face in her hands. And Nora, she just stood there shaking, in front of everyone. The reception went from cheerful to pure chaos in seconds. People were whispering, some awkwardly clapping like maybe this was some kind of bad joke. But no one wasn't joking. Nora slammed her glass down on the table so hard it shattered. She stood up, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "You had no right to say that." Emma just leaned back in her chair, smirking like she'd been waiting years to drop this bomb. "Oh, come on, Nora, you knew. Don't act like you didn't." Daniel turned to Nora, wide-eyed. "Is this true?" And that's when Aunt Linda finally stood up. Her voice cracked. "Enough, Emma, sit down." But Emma wasn't backing down. "Why? So we can all keep pretending. You and Dad have been playing favourites for decades. At least now everyone knows why." Uncle George's face was red, like he might explode. "Shut your mouth," he growled. But poor Nora was just standing there in her wedding gown, tears running down her face. She looked at George and whispered, "So it's true, you're not my dad?" The entire room froze. George couldn't even look at her. And in that silence, the answer was obvious. That's when Chris, the youngest brother, and usually the peacemaker, tried to step in. He stood up, hands raised like he could calm a storm. "Okay, let's all take a breath. This is not the time or place." Nora snapped. "Not the time, Chris. My entire life just got ripped open in front of 200 people." Daniel put his arm around her, but she shook him off. "Don't touch me. I need to hear it from them." She pointed at Linda and George. "Tell me the truth, right now." Aunt Linda started crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Nora, baby, I never wanted you to find out like this." "Like what?" Nora shouted. "That the man I called Dad for 38 years never wanted me. That everything makes sense now why Emma and Chris got love and I got chores." Gasps rippled again. The DJ awkwardly turned off the music. Some guests got up to leave, but most stayed, glued to the drama like it was a car crash. George finally spoke, his voice low and harsh. "I raised you. I put food on your plate, clothes on your back. I didn't have to, but I did." That broke her. "Didn't have to. You're supposed to be my father. No wonder you treated me like a burden. You were just waiting to remind me I wasn't yours." The silence after that was unbearable. People shifted in their seats, no one daring to breathe. Then Nora ripped off her veil, threw it on the floor, and said, "Congratulations, Mom. You finally ruined the one good thing I had." She stormed out of the reception hall, Daniel chasing after her. Emma just laughed bitterly and downed the rest of her wine like she'd won something. And me? I just sat there, hot panting, realising I had front row seats to the complete implosion of my cousin's wedding day. I followed Nora and Daniel outside, where the venue's patio overlooked the rows of grapevines glowing under the string lights. The air was cool, but she wasn't shivering, she was shaking with anger and hurt. Daniel gently grabbed her arm. "Nora, hey, talk to me," he said softly. She yanked her arm free. "Talk, Daniel. My whole life is a lie. I don't even know who I am anymore." He ran a hand through his hair. "I know, I can't fix it, but I can't let you face this alone either." She laughed bitterly. "Alone? I've never had anyone who actually cared about me, not really." Her voice cracked. Tears fell freely now. "Emma, she's always hated me, Mum, Dad, it's all been fake." Daniel held her face in his hands. "It's not fake, Nora, not everything. You have me choosing you." She swallowed, trying to calm down, but it was hard. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Finally, everyone knows. "Enjoy your wedding, loser." Nora crumpled the phone in her hand. I can't do this." She sank onto the bench, burying her face in her hands. At that moment, Chris came out. He looked torn, guilty even. "Nora, I'm sorry. Emma went too far. Mom and Dad, well, they made mistakes, but you've been stronger than all of us." She looked up, eyes red. "Chris, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't anyone?" Chris shrugged helplessly. "I didn't know how, and I didn't want to betray Mom and Dad." "You were protecting them," she said, shaking her head. "And look where it got me, humiliated in front of everyone I care about." Meanwhile, inside, I could hear Aunt Linda sobbing, talking to George in hush, frantic voices. I could only imagine the chaos behind those doors. Nora finally stood up. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and said firmly, I can't let this ruin me. I'm still getting married, but I'm doing it on my terms, and if anyone wants to judge me or my family, let them. Daniel smiled faintly. That's the woman I love. Chris nodded. I'll stand by you, Nora. Emma, well, she's a mess, but you don't have to fight her alone. We all looked back at the wedding hall. Guests were whispering, some taking pictures. Emma was still inside, smirking at the chaos she'd caused. But for the first time that night, Nora didn't look broken. She looked determined. I just want to get married, she whispered. And then deal with all this later, properly. Daniel took her hand, entwining their fingers. Then let's go back in. Your wedding isn't over. She took a shaky breath and nodded. For a moment, the vineyard felt quiet, like the storm had paused. But deep down, we all knew nothing would ever be the same again. And just like that, Nora, the girl who had always been the invisible, responsible one, was stepping forward not just as a bride, but as a woman taking control of her life for the first time in decades. When we walked back into the reception hall, it felt like we'd stepped into a different world. The music had stopped. Guests were whispering in tight clusters, some pointing, some just staring. Em spotted us immediately, her smirk widening. Well, look who's back, she said, voice dripping with mockery. Ready to play Happy Bride again? Nora stopped in the centre of the room and held up her hands, commanding attention. Emma, she said, voice cold but steady, this wedding is not about you, it's about me and Daniel, and if you think ruining it for me is going to make you feel better about yourself, you're wrong. A few guests clapped quietly, unsure whether to cheer or hide. Aunt Linda and Uncle George were frozen near the bar, guilt and fear written all over their faces. Emma scoffed. Oh, come on, Nora, Mom told me all those years she said you'd never fight back. Guess she was wrong. Nora's jaw tightened. I've been quiet because I had no choice, but I choose now. I choose my life, and if you can't accept that, leave, or stay and be civil, your choice. Daniel came up beside Nora, putting his hand on her back. Everyone here is a guest, Emma, and you're acting like one of them should leave, not the bride. Emma rolled her eyes and stalked off to a corner, muttering under her breath. But the tension didn't fully dissipate. I noticed Chris lingering behind her, still watching Nora like he wanted to apologise but didn't know how. The speeches resumed, but now the tone had shifted. Cousins who normally cracked jokes were sober. Uncle George finally took a mic, his voice low. I might want to apologise to Nora, not just for today, but for all the years I wasn't the father you deserved. I hope someday you can forgive me. Nora looked at him, expression unreadable. I don't know if I can forgive everything yet, but thank you for saying that. The crowd murmured, a mixture of empathy and awkwardness. Aunt Linda stepped up next, tears streaming. Nora, my golden girl, I made terrible choices. I favoured the wrong people at the wrong times. I can't take back the pain, but I want to try to be better. For the first time that night, Nora exhaled. A small weight lifted. It's a start, she said. Dinner went on, but the tension lingered. Emma barely touched her food. Chris stayed close to Nora, and the rest of the family tried to act normal. The wedding cake came out, and Daniel pulled Nora into the middle of the room. Let's cut the cake and make this moment ours, okay? Nora smiled, a genuine one this time. Okay, for us. As they sliced the cake, the room began to relax, a few guests even laughing nervously at minor mishaps. But we all knew the family dynamics had shifted. Nothing could go back to exactly how it was before. Favoritism, hidden, and decades of secrets had finally come to light, and everyone had to navigate it. Nora stood taller that night, not because of the dress or the flowers, but because she finally found her voice. She wasn't letting anyone, not even family, steal it from her again. The night finally started to calm down. Guests were dancing, some nervously, some genuinely enjoying themselves. Nora and Daniel were on the dance floor, swaying slowly, while I stayed nearby, keeping an eye on the family drama that was far from over. Chris pulled me aside. I feel awful about how I acted, he whispered. I should have stopped her before she went too far. I know, I said. But the important thing is Nora standing strong. That's all that matters right now. Meanwhile, inside, Emma had cornered Aunt Linda. How could you let me know before she did? I needed this, Emma, she hissed. Linda, completely broken, shook her head. Emma, I never wanted you to hurt her. I thought you'd keep it quiet. I really did. I can't fix this. Emma's face twisted with frustration. Well, you failed. You always do. I sighed. That's when I noticed Nora stepping away from Daniel for a moment. She walked past Emma without a word, her eyes locked on her mom and dad. Mom, Dad, she said, voice firm, I need to know why. Why me? Why did you treat me like I was less? George swallowed hard. Nora, I always thought I don't know. I thought I was doing right by you, but I see now that I failed. Aunt Linda nodded tearfully. I favoured the other two because I wanted to protect them, but in doing so, I hurt you. I know that now. Nora's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained steady. I don't expect everything to be fixed in one night, but if we are going to move forward as a family, you need to be honest and treat me as your daughter, as your sister. Chris stepped closer. I'll support you, Nora, and I'll make sure Emma learns respect too. Emma, overhearing this, rolled her eyes but stayed quiet for once. I think even she realised that Nora wasn't going to be intimidated anymore. Daniel joined her again, holding her hand. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in control. Later, after most guests had left, Nora and Daniel sat in the empty vineyard, surrounded by the remnants of the reception. The fairy lights reflected in the glasses on the tables, giving the scene a quiet, almost peaceful glow. I can't believe it, she whispered, leaning against Daniel. All those years, and it takes one night to make everything fall apart. Daniel kissed her forehead. But look at you, you handled it. You're still standing, and you're getting married. That's what matters. Nora nodded, finally letting herself breathe. I know, I'm done being the invisible one. From now on, I live my life my way. And in that quiet moment, watching the lights twinkle over the vineyard, I realised something. Even though the family secrets had come out, and the favouritism and lies had been exposed, Nora had reclaimed her life. The wedding had been chaotic, yes, but it had also been a turning point for her, for Daniel, and maybe even for the rest of the family. The next morning, the vineyard was quiet, with only a few stragglers helping clean up. Nora and Daniel had stayed overnight at a nearby hotel, and the rest of the family trickled in to collect decorations, gifts, and their thoughts. Emma was sulking in the corner, scrolling through her phone. Chris came over and spoke softly. Emma, you need to apologize, not just for the wedding, but for everything you've done. She looked up, annoyed. I don't owe anyone anything. Chris shook his head. You do. You hurt Nora, and you hurt yourself by holding on to all that bitterness. Emma rolled her eyes again, but Chris didn't back down. He walked over to Nora, who was sitting on a bench outside, sipping coffee and staring at the vineyard rows. You okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. I am. I'm tired, but I finally feel like I'm me, not the golden child, not the responsible one. Just me. Chris hesitated. Do you want me to handle Emma? Nora shook her head. No, she has to realize on her own that she can't treat people like that. I'm done defending her. I'm done defending myself for others' mistakes. Meanwhile, Aunt Linda approached, tears in her eyes. Nora, I know it's too late for me to undo all the hurt, but I want to try, for you, for all of us. Nora took a deep breath. I don't expect perfection, Mom, just honesty. That's all I need. George stepped up as well. I was a fool. I see that now. You were never less than my daughter, even if I treated you like you were. Nora finally smiled, a small but genuine one. Thank you, that's all I needed to hear. Back inside, Emma was still scrolling, clearly trying to avoid confrontation. But she couldn't ignore the subtle looks from family members, Chris giving her a pointed glare, Linda's disappointed frown, George's stern expression. Slowly, she put her phone down and muttered, Fine, I'll apologize. It wasn't a heartfelt apology, but it was a start. Nora didn't push it. She had learned to set her own boundaries. Daniel arrived, carrying 2 coffees, and handed one to Nora. You survived your wedding, he said, smiling. I survived my family, Nora corrected, taking a sip. And that's way harder. We all laughed quietly. For the first time in years, the tension in the family seemed manageable. Secrets had been revealed, favoritism had been confronted, and although the wounds were still fresh, there was finally a path toward healing. Nora looked around at the vineyard, the empty tables, and the remnants of celebration. This was my wedding, she said softly. Not my parents', not Emma's, mine, and I'm going to remember it that way. Daniel nodded. Always yours. That night, as we drove back home, I realized something profound. Families are messy, filled with secrets, favoritism, and mistakes. But people like Nora, strong, resilient, and willing to face the truth, can reclaim their lives, even in the middle of chaos. It wouldn't be perfect from here on out, but for the first time, Nora had the tools to navigate her family on her own terms. And for her, that was enough. A week later, the family gathered at Aunt Linda and Uncle George's house for a more intimate post-wedding celebration. It wasn't about the big show anymore, just family, food, and, for once, honesty. Nora walked in first, wearing a simple dress, her hair pulled back, no makeup except for a soft glow. She looked at peace. Daniel followed, holding her hand, smiling. Chris trailed behind them, carrying a bottle of wine, while Emma lingered near the doorway, arms crossed. Linda greeted Nora with a hug. I know I can't erase the wedding chaos, but I hope we can start fresh. Nora hugged her tightly. We'll see. I can forgive, but that doesn't mean forgetting. George stepped forward, looking more humbled than I've ever seen him. Nora, I've been an awful father in ways I can't fix, but I want to do better, starting now. Nora nodded. I'll hold you to that. Emma finally spoke, her voice hesitant. Nora, I'm sorry for what I said, for ruining the wedding. I was jealous and bitter, and I took it out on you. Nora studied her. There was still edge in her eyes, but she softened just slightly. Thank you for saying that. I hope you mean it. Chris clapped his hands lightly. See, things aren't hopeless. We can fix this, just slowly. Dinner began. The tension had eased enough that some laughter even bubbled up. Aunt Linda made her famous lasagna, and we all sat around the table, the wine flowing, the conversations a mix of catching up and carefully testing the waters of honesty. At one point, Nora leaned back in her chair, looking at her family. You know, I've spent most of my life trying to earn love that was never really mine to earn. Today, I realized I don't need anyone's approval to be happy. Daniel and our life redefine our happiness. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. Exactly, and we'll face the rest together. I watched as the family dynamic shifted subtly. Linda was quieter, more reflective. George avoided his old defensive stance. Chris was protective but respectful. And Emma, she stayed in her corner, but at least she wasn't actively causing chaos. Later, as dessert was served, Nora raised a glass. To honesty, to family, even when it's messy, and to taking control of your own life. Everyone raised their glasses, some more reluctantly than others. But the gesture was symbolic, a recognition that despite the secrets, the favoritism, the past mistakes, they were at least willing to try. After everyone left, Nora and Daniel stayed behind in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up. Nora looked exhausted but content. I feel lighter, she said softly. Like a weight I've carried my whole life is finally off my shoulders. Daniel smiled. And now, we build our life together without secrets, without pretending. Nora nodded, finally smiling fully. Yes, it's not perfect, but it's real. And for the first time, that's enough. As I watched them leave, I realized something profound. Sometimes chaos and betrayal reveal not weakness, but strength. And Nora, my cousin, the girl who had always been invisible, had finally become the woman she was always meant to be. Family drama hadn't disappeared, but for the first time, there was hope. And in that hope, Nora had claimed her life